I'm going to assume that we're all here because the subject of God loving us is of great interest to us. And maybe as Jews that were raised in guilt-ridden homes, the concept of God loving us can actually be a shock. You mean God loves me? I always thought that God is analyzing me, scrutinizing, and making sure I'm doing it the right way, the right thing. And if I'm not, He's going to let me know about it, etc. This is actually extremely, extremely common. This is common, firstly, because we live in a Christian world. And in the Christian world, there's a major judgment dump that's put on everyone. And it also comes from within Judaism because there are many things in the Torah which are discussed, which can, if we read it as is, simply, it can leave a person feeling very threatened, scared, judged, unloved, etc. And so, like everything else, the relationship that we have with God really is going to boil down to the way we choose to see it. In other words, it is what it is. It is what it is, and we'll discuss how. And we'll discuss how, in fact, God loves us endlessly. But whether we're going to be able to be in that type of a relationship with God, with God who loves us, is going to be a choice that we need to make. And so my objective tonight is to assist you as much as I can within 60 to 90 minutes to start moving in that direction, to make a choice. You have to make a conscious choice to see God as a loving God. And that can have a drastic impact on your life. We live in a world of right and wrong. What I mean by that is, we live in a world where everything is looked at as, did you do it right? Did you do it wrong? Are they right? Are they wrong? I'm right, you're wrong. That's the way we always judge things. If you look at all of the conflicts that are going on, every single conflict is always about people who are focusing on who's right and who's wrong. And the reality is that as much as we need to know what's right and we need to know what's wrong in relationships, when relationships are founded on right and wrong, they're actually destroyed by that. Whereas when we go into relationships as a relationship, not as who's right, not as in a context of who's right and who's wrong, but in the context of making sure that everyone feels safe enough to be able to thrive, then we bring out the most right we can from each person, and every person thrives in that environment. Does that make sense to you? Okay, so that can drastically change any relationship, and definitely it can change a relationship with God. You may remember there was once, some of you were here, there was once a ladder on the stage on Yom Kippur, because there was a rabbi talking about a quote from the Kotzker Rebbe. And the quote was that when he was asked which Jew, measuring two Jews, one against the other, which Jew is a greater Jew, a holier Jew, a better Jew, his comment was that it doesn't make a difference who is higher on the ladder. What you need to pay attention to is which direction they are going. So if the person on the bottom rung is moving up and the person on the top rung is moving down, the person on the bottom is actually higher. And that's because life is not about right and wrong. Life is about what we're doing with it and the direction that we're moving in it. And this is actually exactly the way God sees things. It's just that we don't see things that way, and therefore we assume that God doesn't see things this way, and we feel then very much judged by God. And this affects us tremendously. It affects our relationship with God, of course. It surely affects, and it affects everything else that we do in life, because we start walking around within a context of guilt, of feeling like I'm not good, I'm not living the life the way I'm supposed to be living it, etc., etc. So here's a question, and there are going to be a few things that we're going to be doing which will be maybe just slightly a little bit different than we normally do it. Okay? But here's a question. And if you have someone sitting next to you that you're comfortable answering this question to, that would be fantastic. It would be fantastic for you. Okay? So if you want to do that, you can do that too. If you don't, you don't have to. What defines your relationship with God more accurately? Would you say that your relationship with God is more of a loving relationship or more of a fearful relationship? And let me help you with this. When you do what God wants you to do you feel like you do it very often out of guilt, like, ooh, I better do this because I'm supposed to do it? Or do you do it out of love, that this is something I really want to do? Think about that for a minute. Is it something that you do because you know you're supposed to do this? It's an obligation, right? Do you see the commandments in the Torah as an obligation? Or do you see it as doing something out of love for God? 50-50. Okay, that's a very honest answer. That's a pretty good ratio, too. It comes from everything I've studied, and I'll give you a little bit more. I'll give you more later on. I'll address it at the second half of the class. Let me discuss a very big obstacle that we have. Okay, a very big obstacle that we have is this: the moment we talk about God loving us, the immediate question that always comes to mind is, well, then why? Right? And that list of why is a long list, right? Why was there a Holocaust? Why do children have illnesses? Why do people suffer? Why are there innocent people being killed every single day, right? There's a long list of whys, right? So here's what I'm going to try. I'm going to ask you to do your best doing. Do your best to leave that question to the side, okay? Because if we want to have a meaningful conversation, I'm not avoiding it, I'm going to get to it. I'm going to get to it in the general sense. That's a major topic, but I'm going to get to it at the core that I believe is important for us to know. But before we get there, let's move that to the side and let's just be open to another side of God, okay? Because generally speaking, because of that long list of whys, that's actually what prevents us from feeling God's love, because we never permit ourselves to get there. Why don't we permit ourselves to get there? Because we immediately say, but how can it be? I know this when I teach classes in a second. People immediately say, what about the Holocaust? In a second, right? So that becomes a major wall which doesn't permit us to move forward. Okay? So what I'm asking you to do for yourself is to move this wall to the side. Make believe it's a moving wall and just slide it over. We're going to get to it soon. And let's just understand that God loves every single one of us. How do we know this? The Torah repeats it numerous times. We say it in our prayers all of the time. Endless love God loves. God loves. God chose to love us. There is an endless number of references of God loving us. And you may not even be aware of this. And if you're not, in other words, if you cannot think of a single place in our prayers, we'll say, where we read that God loves us, that is an indication of how high your wall is. Okay? And that wall is blocking you. It's blocking you. It's blocking you from experiencing a loving relationship with God. And we may say, well, who cares? So that would be my next question to you. What's the difference between having a relationship with God? What's the difference to you? Okay, as an individual, how does it affect me when my relationship with God is one in which I feel in fear, or when I feel loved? I feel fearful of God or loved by God. How would that play itself out differently within me or within you? What would your answer be? Respect is a healthy form of fear. But what I'm trying to address is the base fear that I'm always doing something wrong, that God doesn't like me because of the way I do things. Or you know what people tell me immediately when they see me? What do people tell me right when they see me very often? They say, Rabbi, I'm not a good Jew. And I tell them, rabbis don't have confession booths. but Rabbi, I'm not a good Jew, right? Why would someone say that? Why would someone say, Rabbi, I'm not a good Jew? That tells you what they feel about their relationship with God and what they think God thinks about them, that they're not good. It's guilt, right? What does that do to a person when a person is feeling guilty or feeling in fear, or that they're not good, they're not doing good enough, versus someone who feels loved? Anyone?
You'd feel tension. You'd feel confusion.
Okay, so would you say that it expands your life or it contracts your life? It contracts your life. When someone is in fear, it contracts. If someone wants to be creative, okay? If someone wants to be creative, should they better off be in a state of fear or in a state of love? Love. Is everyone in agreement? Okay. Okay, so if someone wants to live expansively, generously, givingly, then a person needs to be in a mode of love. If they're in a mode of fear, it shuts someone down, it contracts them. Is everyone in agreement with that? Okay. When someone is in a mode of love, is in a mode of fear, it actually, what does that make them feel about the relationship? Do they want to embrace this relationship, or do they want to exit this relationship? Imagine this. Imagine there's a married couple, okay? And one of them lives in fear of the other because the other just, whenever they want something, they blow, they have a tantrum, they scream, they threaten, and the other person lives in fear, right? Do you think they're going to have an embracing relationship or a very cold and distant relationship? It's clear, it's going to be very cold and distant. It's not possible to have the two together. So when we live a life where our relationship with God remains at the child level of fear, which is, I'm always doing something wrong, God doesn't like me, I'm a bad Jew, etc., that actually contracts us and makes us want to distance ourselves from the relationship. I don't want to go to synagogue. It's going to make me feel guilty again. Don't tell me about a Passover Seder or whatever, anything Jewish is, oh no, the rabbi's coming, and all of a sudden there's a U-turn. I mean, I don't know why I represent that, but because I'm just another person, but, I understand, figuratively speaking, so a rabbi represents a certain role. But that's what it makes people want to move away, because it makes them feel a certain way. That's childlike fear. Sophisticated fear, adult-like fear, is respect, is awe. I'm not going to talk about that much because we're focusing on love, but that is very healthy. And there's no question that the Torah speaks about two mitzvos which we have, which are constant mitzvos. There are 6 constant mitzvos in the Torah. That means that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, they apply. 2 of them are, and that's why this is a very important subject, loving God, fearing God. Okay? The loving God is to feel a love towards God, so we want to embrace that which is godly. Fear of God is, for an adult, it's awe of God. It's realizing the greatness of God and being in awe of that, which creates a level of tremendous respect. But when it's a level of fear, of base fear, then we're always running away. When we see punishments, when we see illness, right? What do we think very often? That may happen to me. Some people may say, I better be a better Jew. I better fast on Yom Kippur, because if not, I don't know what's going to happen. Something bad might happen. Right? That is out of fear. That's distance. Right? Whereas out of love is developing more of a real relationship with God. And that can be improved drastically when we understand how much God loves us, and God is not out to get us. You with me? So tonight I want you to experiment and make a shift and see if Judaism can work without fear, only with love and awe.
Read the prayers on Yom Kippur.
Okay. Okay.
Who shall die by perish and who's going to get their decapitated. It's like
Okay, good.
it's out of love. Okay. It's like a super fearful.
Excellent. So Jenny, let me tell you this. Right? We like to experiment, right?
I do.
Yes, I know that. So let's experiment. You have a certain point of view. I hear you, and you even have evidence to prove it. I hear you, and I know those texts well, right? Okay? Let's put them aside for a few minutes. Let's just put them aside. We're not denying them, and we're not ignoring them. We're going to come back to them, but let's put them aside for a few minutes, and let's just entertain a possibility, a notion, okay? That God has abundant love for Jenny, okay? He loves you immensely, way more than you can even imagine. Way more than you can even imagine, okay? Just imagine that, okay? Okay, good. We're going to do a meditation soon, which I hope everyone is okay with, and it'll help you imagine a little bit more, okay? I want to ask you a few questions, okay? How's everyone doing? Any questions? Yes.
When you say God's love or God loving us,
Mm-hmm.
I can imagine what loving God is from a human perspective. But when you say God loving us, I can't even imagine what that is. I mean, intellectually, I know what you're saying, but on an emotional level, what does that mean? Like, what is God's love? Like, if you had to explain what that was.
Great. Good question. We're going to get to that in just a few minutes, okay? And I'm actually going to ask everyone to answer that question. But we're going to get to that in a few minutes. Okay? Let me ask you, I want to ask you a few questions. Question number one is, from 1 to 10, okay? If you had to describe the love that God has for you, the way you would feel it on a normal day before we began this discussion, just give it, 10 would be immense love, and 1 would be no love, right? Or almost no love. What number would you give it? 1 to 10. How about 1 second? Stop, everyone. Everyone think about the number. Think about the number. Okay? Everyone has a number? Everyone has a number. Okay. We have, okay, so everyone's got a number in your head of how much you feel that God loves you. Let me ask you this question. If your relationship with God was a more loving relationship, how would that make a difference in your life? Can you think of one way in which your life would be different if God loved you, if you felt God's love, you had a more loving relationship with God? How would your life be different? How would that make a difference in your life in just one small way? Concretely, can anyone think of something concretely that would be different in your life if God loved you more?
I'd be less anxious.
You'd be less anxious. Okay, excellent. Yeah.
View things always in good as opposed to sometimes in negative.
You'd be much more positive. Okay. Yeah. You wouldn't exist. Beautiful. Beautiful. Okay. That's a real loving relationship. Okay. For those who are, you'd be happy. Okay. So the reason why I'm going here, some of you I'm sure are not even answering these questions in your head, right? Because Rabbi, why are you bothering me? Can you just explain the subject, right? So I'll tell you why I'm bothering you. Because this is not a subject. This is your life. And so if you don't bother to answer the questions, your life is not going to be any different, right? And as they say, Einstein once said, right? Insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. So I really want to help you and help myself, because when I teach, it helps me tremendously, to develop a stronger and much healthier relationship with God. So therefore, it's beneficial for you to answer these questions. Specifically this question, how would your life be different if your relationship with God was a more loving relationship? Okay, and we had some very good answers here. Those are very good answers. Okay? Here's another big question for those who are in the mood of thinking. Why are you not there yet? What is one obstacle that's in your way that's preventing you from having a loving relationship? So like Ray's asked a good question, which I would say would be an obstacle. I can't understand what that means that God loves me, right? What does that mean? How does it look like? What does it smell like? What does it feel like? Okay, that's good. That's an obstacle. Does anyone else have an obstacle? You don't have to share it necessarily. If you'd like to share, you can. What is in your way? What has been preventing you all of these years of feeling? Jenny would say, because she said, right, because I come to Yom Kippur, the holiest day, and hear about God decapitating people. Right? So that's in my way. That's good. That's good. We're identifying the obstacle. Yes.
Protected all the time.
You feel protected all the time. That's excellent. That means that you feel God loving you. Very good. Yeah.
It's not easy to be religious, to believe in God, because I was raised without God.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's very difficult to go there.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question, Maya, but I'm asking everyone the question, okay? This is a question to everyone. If you identified your obstacle, here's a very important question, and this makes all the difference, okay? And perhaps you may not be able to answer this question now. Hopefully by the end of tonight, you'll be able to answer it better. What is one thing that you can do in order to overcome that obstacle? Just one thing. It could be a very small thing. So what is one thing that you can do in order to overcome that obstacle?
To study more.
Okay, excellent. Yeah.
I was going to say the same thing, but I think in the case my obstacle is a lack of understanding.
A lack of understanding.
Feeling of distance, right? Well, like, I'm supposed to love God, but I don't understand God or have, a deep feeling of what God is.
Okay. Okay, very good. Excellent. So you need to learn more about God in order to be able to develop a deep relationship with God. Excellent.
Also, mostly mitzvahs are that venue. Our mitzvahs the avenue for us to, even though we don't understand everything, but that puts us close.
They're definitely the tools, but to consciously experience that, everyone has different mitzvahs that will do that for them. So we have to find those mitzvahs that really bring it into us into a feeling state. And for some people, it's going to be using, at least beginning in the head. Emotions can't stay in the head. So we have to at some point come down, but, to the heart. But but it's understanding. Like, I don't know what we're talking about. What's God? For some people, that's the obstacle. For other people, it's, I experience other things from God. I don't experience love from God. Right?
And one more. Some people to be very intellectual and all the time questioning it's true or not. It's true or not.
Mhm.
Because we've learned from our teachers. It's completely different.
Right. So something you may have heard from me, which is in response to the last discussion, something you've heard from me probably many times is that the real Jewish and godly experience is actually, I'm not negating understanding, but I'm also saying that there's a deeper experience than understanding, and that is the experience of the soul. And the soul is deeper than the mind. It's not shallower than the mind, it's deeper than the mind. And when we can let our soul be free, then we don't need our mind. In fact, our mind becomes an obstacle because it hinders by not letting us have that broader experience.
That's called faith.
That's called faith. Or faith comes from that level. Exactly so. Faith
It's
comes.
also the base of all religions. That you have to have faith, and I will argue again that there's some level of fear that has to exist in order for religion to exist.
Okay. Okay, I heard you. I hear you loud and clear. Okay. Let me ask you this question, and this is going back to Teresa's question. Everyone turn to the person next to you for a moment and just define love. What does love mean? Give a definition to that word. Okay? Just turn to the person next to you and just define the word love. Do it for yourself. It's a strange class, Gil, huh? That's okay. You're going to get the most out of this, because it's... What? How do you define love? It's a good question. What does the word mean? Anyone come up with definitions? No?
She says unconditional, I said
Okay. Jason?
Saying to care for without expecting anything in return.
To care for without expecting anything in return. Okay, excellent.
Unconditional acceptance.
Unconditional acceptance. Excellent.
Teamwork.
Teamwork. Okay. Very good. One second. We're not analyzing everyone's answers. We're listening to everyone's answers. We're loving everyone's answers. Okay? So you can only give an answer, not a comment on someone else's. You're giving an definition? Yeah.
Like a relationship between child and the parent.
That's an example. But what's the definition? What is that? Unconditional love. Okay, that's unconditional. Okay. Compassion. It's to give. Trust. Okay. What's that? Respect. Okay. Okay. Let me tell you this. You may have heard this story in the past, but I'm going to tell you what I believe summarizes the definition of love. Okay. The definition of when I say that I love you, I love this, I love whatever it is that I'm loving, that means that I am consumed within that thing. I'm going to give you an example of a story, a little anecdote, which I think really captures what love is. It's the anecdote of the man who orders fish in the restaurant, and his friend walks into the restaurant and says, "Oh, you must like fish. I love fish. Salmon. Salmon's my favorite fish. I love salmon." And the friend tells him, if you loved salmon, you would let it swim in the water. You don't love salmon, you love yourself. Okay? This really captures what love is. When you love something, you are consumed with them and their needs. Okay? It is really, love is an act of selflessness. That's what love is. It's devotion to the beloved. We as humans have a hard time with that. Okay? Every human being I know has a hard time with this on some level. Some of us are more naturally loving, some are less naturally loving, but for us to be completely devoted to someone else is a very hard thing to do. At some point we ask, what about me?
Well,
Right?
what Maya said about the relationship between a parent and a child is the closest that can get.
Okay.
I think that parents are.
I would agree that is one of the highest levels of love that we know of. Yeah, possibly the highest level. Right. So love also is not out of convenience. Love is out of commitment. When you love someone, you become totally, entirely, completely committed to them. So theoretically, see, in our society, love is used in the exact opposite way of what it means. As is expressed in the story of the fish. When we say we love, what we mean is that it satisfies us. That's the exact opposite of what love is. Love is when I am consumed with you. So theoretically, and hopefully practically, when we get married and we commit love to each other, we're committing to a major commitment. And the major commitment is to be totally consumed with the other person. And obviously it takes many, many years, probably a lifetime of growth where that love will hopefully grows and grows. Because none of us can say that we're perfect at it. But that's what love is. So when we say that God loves us, what we're saying is that God is consumed with us unconditionally and with our needs unconditionally. I want to give you one example just to put things into perspective and to also put the decapitation into perspective. Okay? Okay. How many people in this room, how many people do we know personally that were decapitated? Okay. So we have one person, one hand, from all of us, right? How many people in this room consistently, for over 30 years, woke up every single morning? How many? How many people consistently breathed about every 2 to 3 seconds? I don't know how often we breathe for the last, for your lifetime, right? And had air to breathe, and had lungs which were working, and blood circulating to give you the energy to breathe, right? So a lot of the way we look at things has to do with what we are focusing on. And when we pay close attention to what we often don't focus on, and if we can actually meditate upon it for just a few minutes, we should, in theory, be overwhelmed by the overwhelming love that God shows to us. The commitment that God demonstrates to us is actually overwhelming. It's overwhelming, if you think about it. If you also think about how often you think about God, I would ask you, how many minutes today did you spend thinking about God? 1, 3, 5, 7, 10, 20. Can anyone say they thought about God for an hour today? An accumulation of 60 minutes? Definitely? Okay. Fantastic. How many minutes in total do you think you would?
I think
Yeah.
it's bad like all the time.
It's fantastic. Okay, that's great. I'm actually amazed by that. I wish I could say that.
That's the fear.
It's the fear. Oh, okay, it's the fear.
Why did I do wrong?
So now let's put this into a marriage. Okay, let's put this into a marriage for a moment. Okay. I'm going to assume it was 60 minutes or less. Okay, for me that's what it was. Because even when I'm praying, I'm not thinking about God constantly, or not even constantly would be an understatement, but not constantly. But
We're all here thinking about God for at least 90 minutes.
we have to get to them. We'll see if you make it to 90 minutes. Okay, so imagine this. Let's put this into a marriage for a moment. Okay. And I want you to put yourself on the God side. You're the spouse who's always doing for the other. This is probably who you are anyway, right? You're always doing for the other person, right? You're always doing for the other person, and they don't say thank you. They don't appreciate it. All they do is take more and more, and they do nothing for you. They never have time for you. They never acknowledge you. Or if they do, it's a quick. Hello, God. Blessed is God for healing the sick. Okay, I need to be at work in a few minutes, right? That type of a thing, right? So now put that into a relationship, right? Put that into a relationship. And then imagine yourself being the person who's giving, and it's like 10 years have gone by, not 30, 10 years have gone by. And it's like, this relationship, where's it going? We need therapy badly. I mean, this is crazy, right? So yeah, I can't stay in a relationship like this, right? This is just, there's yelling and screaming now because, what a nerve, I do so much for you, you don't do anything for me. But no, it just continues and continues and continues, right? That is called true love. That's what that is. That is true love that God is expressing to every single one of us. That's what it is. I'd like to read a story to you. I just don't have any time check in here. And you know how rabbis can be, so I just want to keep in touch with my... Okay, so this is a story about a woman by the name of Sonia who wrote a book, I wonder if anyone read it, called The Watchmaker's Daughter. Anyone read that book? No. Okay. So she was the daughter. It's a true story. She's the daughter. It's a memoir. Anyway, so she's a child of two Holocaust survivors, who both her mother and father lost their entire family in the Holocaust. Her father saved lives in the Dachau prison, became a watchmaker in New York, and her mother became who was a gifted concert pianist, was about to make her debut when the Nazis seized power. And in the end, they both survived, came to America. They lived in New York, and the father was a watchmaker. Okay, growing up in the shadow of catastrophe, this girl Sonia was driven to achieve the highest peaks of worldly success. Her daring ambitions took her from Barnard to Yale's law school to Oxford University. You all impressed? Where she meets a man outside of her faith who will change her life and her family's in ways she would never imagine. Okay? Holocaust survivor, and this is her journey. A child of a Holocaust survivors, and this is her journey. Okay, Sonia grows up speaking Yiddish, learning the lessons of Judaism, but she pursues the American dream, which her parents can never understand. Her mother tries encouraging her in more traditional Jewish feminine role, but she's in the strong, American woman feminist mode. And this is what she shares at the end of her book. Okay, you ready for this, everyone? Okay, I'm going to read this to you. For the most part, until the end, my brother Manny, is away in California where he works as a lawyer and real estate developer. I am with her every day. She's with her mother, who's ill and dying. Spooning raspberry ices into her mouth is the last thing I do for my mother. They are the last things she tastes on this earth. I am glad they are sweet. On her last day, she is mellow, smiling. I can see love in her eyes. I take a chance. Who do you really love more? She asked her mother. Yes, he was a boy, and I had lost my father and my two little brothers in the Holocaust, she said easily, and he was always close to me. Then she adds, but sometimes you more than anyone. This is even better than my father, who loved me most when I succeeded. The love she holds for me is there, even though I have failed her in every way. She's so sweet as a dying person. She's so sweet even as she lies dead. So different from my father, who raged until the end, who took dying as a personal and undeserved final insult. My mother, Gita, is teaching me something about life that until then, despite all the diplomas, I had not learned. Becoming a mother has brought me close to the secret of her wisdom. Watching her fade as love burns constant in her heart brings me ever closer. She is a woman with a woman's modest and forgiving heart. If my father's main question to me was, what did you accomplish? Hers was, what can I do for you? Or isn't this a joy sitting here with our glass of tea? When my mother Gita was first diagnosed, my practical brother asked her to sign a legal document called a DNR, do not resuscitate. Nonetheless, I am now thinking, do resuscitate. My mother, whether or not she understood me, would have died for me. When the Nazis put her mother on the death line, my mother ran over to her side and somehow got her out. She could have been shot, but she didn't care. Had God asked her to take her child to a mountain and sacrifice her, unlike Abraham, she would not have obeyed. She would have said, take me instead. She would have run up the mountain and laid herself down on the altar for me, as she once did for her mother. That is what a real mother can do. And I'm going to leave it at that. I'm reading that to bring out what real love is. And hopefully, Razel, I'm helping to answer some of your question about what that is. Now, you may ask, how do we feel it? And I don't know if that's your next question. What's your question?
Human love.
That's human love.
That's human love. That's different than God's love, because God isn't human.
And so this is God's love that God constantly gives us. Okay? Obviously, there are exceptions, but we're not focusing on that yet. We'll get to that soon. Otherwise, we have a wall in front of us.
We're made in God's image, so presumably our feelings and behaviors are godly in some way.
Yeah. And God's love is in the form spiritually, it means giving, it means devotion, it means commitment to, right? And that God demonstrates that in an infinite way. Okay? So that's on God's level. It's just love on God's level. And what that feels like is what it's going to feel like if we permit ourselves to feel it. That means that if we close our eyes for a few minutes, which we'll do in a few short minutes, and try and feel it, then maybe we will feel something. The same thing we would feel when we feel comforted by the love of a parent that is, a child feels when they are embraced by their parent. When someone comes home after being away for a long time. For whatever type of comfort experience you may have experienced in your life where you experienced real love. And imagine if you had that feeling when you thought about God instead of other feelings that we often have when we feel about God. There's a beautiful passage in the Song of Songs. A reference, Jenny. Okay, there's a beautiful passage in the Song of Songs. The book Song of Songs, Rabbi Akiva, one of the greatest Talmudic sages, stated is the Holy of Holies. It's the holiest of all of the Tanakh, of the books of Torah, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim. Okay? So imagine, he says it's holier than Bereshis, than Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, all of those. Song of Songs is the holiest of them all. What is so holy about the book of Song of Songs? King Solomon wrote the book. And the book is basically about two lovers. And it's a very poetic book. And if you like poetry and you like romance, this is the perfect book for you. But what was King Solomon was a romance novelist? Why was he writing this?
He had 1,000 wives.
This is true. That would make him a non-romance novelist. Believe me, right? You know that, right? It only created all the trouble he had in his life, in fact, right? So he writes his book, Song of Songs. And what was he actually writing? He was writing a metaphor of the relationship between God and the Jewish people. That's what he was writing. In this metaphor, which is always the way it is in our scriptures, God is the husband and the Jewish people are the wife. And okay, that's the metaphor in this whole Song of Songs, which is a fascinating book when you interpret it into the relationship. And it's all about love and distance. And it's all about God reaching out to the Jewish people, and it's about the Jewish people running away, which is what we often do on a human level as well from love, right? And it's the book is expressing the tremendous need for us to choose to be in a loving relationship with God. It doesn't happen on its own. It's a choice that we need to make. And I just want to share with you the first 4 verses, most of the first 4 verses. We're getting into the details of chapter 5. Okay? It begins by saying, I have come to my garden. And you're going to see it keeps on jumping back and forth between the groom speaking and the bride speaking, the man speaking and the woman speaking. I have come to my garden, my sister, my bride. This is God speaking. I have gathered my spice. I have eaten my sugar cane with my sugar. I have drunk my wine with my milk. Eat, friends, drink abundantly, beloved ones. Okay? That's God. Sounds gracious. Sounds wonderful. Everyone's yearning for such a vacation, right? The Jewish people, the bride responds, I sleep, right? Our lover comes, the husband comes, God comes, and where are we? I sleep, but my heart is awake. I sleep, but my heart is awake. Okay? So that means that in one way there's a part of me that has become unconscious. It's no longer conscious in the relationship. But my heart is awake, it can still be stimulated. Okay? My heart can be touched, I can be moved. Okay? And that is really the state of us in exile. We're sort of in many respects out of touch. We sort of feel distant and maybe even not even paying attention to this relationship so much anymore. What does God say in response? Hark, my beloved is knocking. And open for me, my sister, my beloved, my dove, my perfect one, for my head is full of dew, my locks with the drops of the night. God is knocking on the door. We're sleeping, and God's knocking on the door. And God is saying, my sister, my beloved, my dove, my perfect one, open up the door for me. Just open up the door for me. I want to come in. I want to be with you. I want to love you. I want to embrace you. We respond, I have taken off my tunic. How can I put it on? God, I already took off my God clothing. I took off my Jewish clothing. I took off my clothing that you have given me. I've donned foreign clothing. I'm no longer wearing that anymore. I have bathed my feet. How can I soil them? I've walked in other foreign places. How can I come back here? We feel guilty. We feel unfit, undeserving, etc. And what does God say? My beloved stretched forth his hand from the hole, and my insides stirred because of him. God pierces a hole into the door, through the door, even though we're not opening it. So we're defying God in many respects. We feel like we can't even open the door. And God says, you know what? I will begin. I'll initiate. I will create a crack in the door. And I will extend my hand through it. And we respond to that our insides are stirred because of him. And God says, I opened it a crack, and now I need you to open it the rest of the way. What is King Solomon writing? He's writing the yearning that God has to have a loving relationship with us, and the need for us to step up and take responsibility to have a loving relationship. And like anything else in this world which is of value, it is far easier to see the wall that blocks us from seeing God's love and to point to those things versus actually seeing what it is that God is offering us. And so what we're trying to do is take a few minutes from our vast life, God willing, of 120 years, just a few minutes tonight to give attention to God's love. And then we'll deal with the wall once we give that attention. Okay, so I'm going to risk doing something. Let me tell you one other story, actually. And this is the Hasidic perspective on our relationship with God is what I'm telling you. Okay, there are some people who thrive, and again, there is, they have some basis for what they're saying. It's a choice of what we're going to emphasize in our lives. But the Hasidic emphasis on our relationship with God is the love that God shows us, God being a father and us being his children. There was a story that some of you may remember, where there was a whole bunch of rabbis that were asked in a certain city if they can all come together to share words of inspiration during the month before Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur in preparation for the high holidays. Okay, there's a whole lineup of rabbis. A whole bunch of rabbis. One of those rabbis happened to have been a Chabad rabbi. Okay, so he came, he'll share a few words. And one after the next, every single rabbi was preparing the Jewish people, the people they were speaking to, for doomsday. The day of judgment is coming. You are going to be judged by God. Analyze what you have done and how you've lived this past year. You know what you did wrong. You know where you disappointed God, etc., etc. Right? Building up a drama. And by the way, I'll tell you as a speaker, it's much easier to captivate a crowd with fear than it is with love. Much, much easier. Much easier to captivate with fear. The fire and brimstone, fantastic. You can grab people immediately. People get caught up in that very quickly. The emotion always works. So this whole thing. And then there's a speaker right before him. Okay? And this speaker gets up and says, I want you to imagine that the IRS just decided to audit your books. Okay? And he builds up this whole drama. He was a fantastic speaker, so he did a fantastic job at this. The IRS is going to audit your books, right? You know what you wrote down on your tax return. You know what's going to happen when you're audited, right? Imagine how you're feeling now. And he goes on, dramatizes this. Another week goes by, and another week, and now it's the night before the IRS is coming to collect your ledger or your books or whatever it is, right? And to go through everything, right? How are you that night? You can't sleep. And then he pounds on the pulpit. How can you sleep tonight when you know that Rosh Hashanah is only a few days away and God's going to judge you and you know what God's going to do to you in this whole thing, right? And he gets off and he walks off the podium on this high, this crescendo that he built of awe and fear of what Rosh Hashanah is going to be. And he needs to go onto the stage now and speak to the Chabad rabbi. And this is the last message he wants to leave everyone with. This is the last message he wants to leave. And he's like sweating out of his mind because he doesn't know what he's going to do. What's he supposed to say? And the previous speaker did a fantastic job. He was a drama king. He did a great job. So he's walking up the stage and just trying to figure this all out. And he had a moment of inspiration. And he got up and he said, we all heard the inspiring words of the previous rabbis, and especially the previous speaker, and how true they are. How true they are. Imagine a king, right, who has subjects, and he's going to look at his subjects to see how they're doing, and he's going to judge them, and they're out of line. A king doesn't hesitate to punish them. He said, however, we are all very lucky, because the one who's going to be judging us on Rosh Hashanah is going to be our Father. And we all know what it looks like when a child does something wrong and their father comes to speak to them. With all of the disappointment that the father may have, and even the yelling that the father may put out there, at the end of the day, he loves his child and he won't do anything to hurt them. So when we go to Rosh Hashanah this year, we don't need to worry. We just need to embrace God as our Father and commit to Him that we're going to do better next year. That is the complete difference between seeing our relationship with God as a loving relationship or seeing our relationship with God as a fearful relationship. And it makes all the difference in how we're going to respond when we're praying on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur or when we go through our day-to-day activities. How are we doing? Okay? Are you up to a meditation or I can skip it? Is everyone up to? Let's try it. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. We're going to try it. Okay, and then we're going to talk about the big wall that's blocking some of us or blocks us at some times. Okay? Okay, so here's what I want to tell you before we begin, okay? How many of you have ever meditated even once before? Raise your hand. Okay. Okay, 2/3 of us? Okay. Your hands were up? Yeah? Okay. Have you ever meditated, done any meditation anywhere before? Yes? Okay. Okay. See, here's what I'm going to tell you, okay? Nothing has to happen. Right, let's get everyone's attention. Is everyone with me? Okay? Nothing has to happen and nothing is supposed to happen. When you do a meditation, whatever happens, happens. And that means that if you fall asleep, God bless you. You owe me the biggest thank you, okay, for giving you a few minutes of quiet in your day. That's fine. I mean, whatever. I hope you don't fall asleep, but if you fall asleep. Whatever happens, happens. There is no pressure here. There's no intention here. The intention is only that I'm going to guide you. I'm going to be talking and guiding you about what to think about. And whatever that does for you, it does for you. You may hate me when we're done with this, or you may love me, or you may say this was very helpful, or it did nothing for me. And all of that is all perfect and good, okay? See, here's what I'm going to ask you to do, especially if you're tired. If you can sit up, don't lean back. Unless you absolutely need to, don't lean on the back of your seat, okay? Just sit down on your chair with your legs open and your hands on your legs, okay? And sit as tall as you can sit. Okay, that's just going to help you so you'll stay engaged. Okay? Okay? I'm going to ask everyone to close your eyes. Beautiful. We are going to go to a peaceful place. A place where you can relax and take notice. You'll be able to take notice of what is going on around you and within you. Let's begin by taking 3 deep, slow breaths. Breathe in deeply, let it all out. Breathe in deeply, let it all out. Breathe in deeply and let it all out. Feel yourself being held up and supported by the chair under you. As you sit here, very relaxed, with closed eyes, I want you to give yourself permission to imagine. Imagine that you are sitting safely in a yard where the grass is green, the lawn is beautifully manicured. It's a beautiful, sunny day. No one is around. There is only you. There are no distractions. There is nothing that you need to do. There is nowhere that you need to go. You're relaxed. As you relax, you begin to feel the warmth of the rays of the sun. You feel very safe and protected by them. You feel the rays of the sun embracing you. It's a very good feeling. As you relax some more, you begin feeling a light, refreshing breeze. You hadn't noticed it at first, but now that you are more relaxed, you begin to take more notice. You feel so safe and secure. In this safe space, you now become even more aware. You take more notice. You become aware of sounds, very familiar sounds. The sounds of birds chirping. How natural and beautiful it sounds. It's like a beautiful harmony. You feel so relaxed, so safe, and so much more in touch with what's going on around you. You lose complete awareness of yourself. You are so absorbed in the beauty of the natural world around you. You become absorbed in the sounds, the breeze, and the warm sun. As you begin to feel the warm sun on your body and on your skin, you become aware of yourself again. You think of how your body is made up of cells. Cells so small that you can't even see them. Trillions of cells. How much is a trillion, you wonder? It's too large for your mind to comprehend. Yet, they all fit into your body. They make up your body. You become aware of trillions of cells moving around. As you become aware of the movement of all of these cells, you begin to feel warm. Warm from all of the movement. You feel alive. You notice how all of these cells move in groups, each in the exact place they belong. You notice how they all move in perfect harmony. Each cell moves as if it has a distinct purpose, a distinct role. Every cell is doing exactly what it is supposed to do. Trillions of cells, each one doing exactly what it's supposed to do. You wonder, what would happen if only one cell begins to function out of harmony? How this could lead to chaos, to an illness or a disease, God forbid. Yet, not a single cell is out of order. Your heart becomes filled with gratitude. Gratitude to God for orchestrating this awesome harmony. Gratitude to God for orchestrating this awesome harmony day after day, hour after hour, minute after minute, second after second. You feel the kindness of God for constantly maintaining this harmony. The harmony of trillions of cells that make up who you are, that give you your abilities, that provide you with health. Why does God do this for you? Because He loves you. He created you because He loves you. He watches over you because He loves you. Even when you may not reciprocate, going hours or days or weeks without thinking about Him, He loves you. He knows your challenges. He gave them to you. He knows your failures. He created you imperfect. He loves you just as you are, just as He made you. Make room for His love. Don't resist it. Take a deep breath and breathe in God's love. Breathe out and exhale your resistance to it. Make a lot of room within you for that love. Take another deep breath and breathe in God's immense love. Breathe out and exhale your resistance to it. Make as much room as you possibly can to feel God's love. Behold, the Almighty stands above you, and while His glory fills the whole world, He gazes upon you to see how you conduct yourself. No, not to see if you're doing right or wrong. He gazes upon you because He loves you. He cherishes every bit of good that you do. You are so important in His eyes that He can't stop gazing upon you, like a parent who gazes upon their child. You once again become aware of the sounds around you. The chirping birds, you feel a slight breeze, you feel the rays of the sun, the warmth they embrace. You feel as if the rays are rays of love, the rays of God embracing you and telling you He loves you. You give yourself a moment to bask in these rays, to feel God's love, to notice how special you feel, how accepted you feel, how much God wants you and needs you. He created you. He created your desires and weaknesses, and He loves you for it all. You feel a strong breeze. The air stirs you as you slowly become more aware. You become aware of the chair you are sitting on, and you feel the floor beneath your feet. When you are ready, gently open your eyes and reorient yourself. Right. So actually, both of those are very true and valuable emotions and feelings towards God. Both of them are very important. And there are times that we need to be in a feeling of love, and times that we feel that we need to be in a mode of awe. So there are different times which are appropriate, and some people by nature will be are more awe-oriented, some people are more loving-oriented. So that's not a bad thing. But there definitely needs to be some times that we are feeling, and I'm sure we've all felt this, when there are moments in our life where there was a tremendous blessing that happened to us, and we felt like tremendous gratitude to God. Can anyone relate to that? Okay, so that is a moment, but we want to be able to repeat that moment more often than we have it, by consciously choosing to experience that moment. Not by making up something that isn't, but by getting in touch with something that is that we're normally not in touch with, because we're asleep and only our heart is awake.
That is easier to do in retrospect. That it's easier
To think about,
yeah, to see a loving moment in the past once the storm has passed and say, oh, that was really something positive, but in the end, then while you're experiencing something that is not so pleasurable, to say, oh, this is a loving moment.
I think that, let me give you an example where in the moment people very often experience something. When parents, I'm just going to use this as an example, but there are many things. When parents will experience their child going through something significant, then during the moment as it's happening, they can, not everyone, but feel a tremendous feeling of gratitude, right? That I was given this moment in my life. Right? It can be where someone in a relationship, where they experience a very powerful moment in a relationship and they have gratitude to God that they were given this. You understand? It could even be if someone gets a job. I mean, it can be, and it should be for those things as well. Okay, let's talk about, are there any questions? Okay. I want to talk about let's talk about the big wall, that's the big block, okay? Okay. Let's talk about the big block, and here's what I want to do. I'm not here to answer why bad things happen to good people. That's not what I'm going to, but I'm going to share a perspective, and it's a perspective that many of you may have heard, but I want you to give serious consideration to as we're giving focus to this tonight, okay? If we want to, we need to understand God, as Jason said. We need to understand God. And I want to use just one word to describe God in the context of what we need to understand now, okay? And that is the one adjective, the one word I would use to describe God is that God is infinite, okay? Infinite means that God has no limitations at all. Okay? That's why it would be wrong to say that God is here and not there. Because the moment we say that God is here and not there, we are limiting God in space. That's simply not true, because God is infinite. The reason why God didn't begin at a certain point is because God is infinite. Something which is infinite has no boundaries, not in the beginning, not in the end, not to the right, not to the left. It's infinite. And here's the other thing that we need to accept with a bit of maybe humility. That a human being, such as you and I, are inherently and by definition limited. Okay? We're inherently by definition limited. That means that it is not virtually impossible, it is absolutely impossible for a limited entity to absorb an infinite entity. It doesn't fit. It doesn't fit. So therefore, it is not possible for a human being to truly and completely, entirely understand God. We can understand aspects of God, but we cannot entirely understand God. Okay? This is very important. So if I were to ask you, what are some implications of the fact that God is infinite? What would you say? God is infinite. What are some of the implications of that? That means that what? That we're not going to understand a lot of things. Anything else?
God's outside of time, so everything that happened is in our world. What's going to happen, what
Excellent. So God can experience everything at once. God's not limited into the time frames that we are, that we only see what's happening right now or within our limited lifetime. Anything else? Okay. I think that's enough. Let me tell you this. I can think, when I was putting this all together, I was able to think of 2 relationships, right? Significant relationships that I've had that were not good relationships. Okay, there were significant relationships, but they were not good relationships. Okay? And the other person, I mean, you know this, right? The other person was the devil, right? It was absolutely wrong, and, they weren't good people, and the list of problems with them were endless, and they needed a lot of help, but they refused to get it, etc., right? Naturally, that's the way it was, right? Of course, right? And in these 2 particular relationships, both of them, which are significant relationships, circumstances, thank God, turned them around. I would say it was more than circumstances, it was great effort that turned them around, okay? And when they turned around, suddenly a person that looked, I'll say, as dark as black, looked as bright as white. Okay? What changed? What changed between the before and the after? Did the person actually transform and become this magically better person? No, that's not what happened at all. What changed was the way I was able to see the other person. I was looking at them through one filter, and thank God I was able to get another set of filters on to be able to see them differently. And that made all the difference in the relationship. So when we have to understand, and what I learned is that what I thought I was seeing wasn't reality. It was my interpretation of of that person. That wasn't that person. It was untrue definition. In fact, I remember clearly I was on a conference call that had to do with coming up with ways to help certain types of relationships. Okay, and of resolving issues. And I remember there was a person on the call that was describing a person they were in a relationship with in a very ugly manner. And I told that person that you have to be able to reach a point where you don't see that person as the devil, but realize that that person actually is a very good, well-intended person, and they're not, this vicious monster that you're creating in your mind for them to be, and you need to be able to see them differently. And that's going to change everything that you're experiencing from them. You following me? My point is one point, that what we see is not what is. And so therefore, when we experience certain things from God, we can insist it is, whatever it is, the way we see it. And I understand the way we see it because I see it the same way. As harsh, as gruesome, as unimaginable, whatever it is. But we have to understand that because we're in a relationship with an entity that we cannot completely understand, we have to, for ourselves, we don't have to, but if we want to, it will better our life to be able to realize that God is infinite, and therefore we cannot grasp this. And I want to share a beautiful story. Okay, beautiful story. Yes?
In a situation like that, when bad relation happens, right, do you have to change your perspective only to change the situation for better, or another person should change her or his perspective in order to change?
Well,
Bad relationship,
okay.
see different from different
Right.
perspectives.
So I don't want to get into a relationship discussion between 2 people because I want to focus on relationship with God. But I'm just going to say this. Whether the other person needs to, which they probably do also, in most cases, it really doesn't make a difference because you can't do anything about that. The only thing you can do is about what you do because you can't control them. You can only control yourself. So the only thing you can do is change your perspective. The truth also is that when you change your perspective, it creates space for them to change their perspective. It gives room for their ego to make a change as well. Okay? Okay. But that's a relationship conversation. So, yes.
Like where I think the difficulty is, and maybe you have a brilliant answer for that, is that so when we talk about relationships between two people, we can say, well, I always have this kind of problem with this person because that's just the style. This person is like this. It's just the way the person
Right.
is, and it's like that with everybody.
Mhm.
But with God, we see how like tragedies happen to some people and blessings happen to other people. So like God is very different with, it's not like, oh, that's just his style.
Correct. Correct. Actually, with God, there's a deep meaning and reason behind it which we don't understand. But if we can accept that everything that God does is with deep meaning and reason, then we can, I'm not going to say we embrace suffering at all, right? But we at least can attribute meaning to it, as opposed to saying that there's just a vicious, uncontrollable God that's just, doing things which are out of control. God is infinite. There's no way I can possibly comprehend that everything that happens in the universe, or nearly, I understand far less than I don't understand, and I can only understand as much as I can and accept everything else from God, who's infinite and I cannot comprehend. I know that's a very difficult thing to do, and I know that there are some of us in the room that have suffered certain things in our lives where I feel guilty even saying this, because who am I to speak? But I'm saying it simply because I think that if there's a way for us to embrace this in some small way, it can transform our lives. Let me share a story with you which gives a perspective of it. There's a woman by the name of Miriam Adahan, who's I think she's a therapist. She wrote a whole bunch of Jewish books on psychology, and she shares a beautiful story. When she moved to Israel in 1981, she moved into an absorption center, and next to her was an Iranian woman who was a widow with I think it was 4 children, who lived in a 1-bedroom apartment, and this is important, who worked as a clerk in the post office. But this woman had real dignity. She was a woman who carried herself with dignity. And one day, their neighbors, they got in conversation, and she shared her story. And this was the story that she shared. She was an extremely wealthy woman. Her husband had a tremendous business in Iran. And in 1980, I think it was, right, when the Shah was overthrown? 79, thank you. So in 79, the Shah was overthrown, and everything changed, and it became very dangerous for Jews. One day, a bunch of people came into her husband's rug store, murdered him, claimed that he was an agent of the Shah, smeared his blood all over the wall, whatever. The moment and here she was with 4 kids, widow, in complete fear. She knew one thing that she knew. She knew one thing. She needed to leave the country immediately. And so she immediately contacted a person who takes people through an escape route. And I don't know if you ever read about this, but many Jews have gone through this route, which took about 2.5 weeks to get to Turkey. And it was an extremely, extremely difficult and dangerous route to go through. And she was doing this with her little kids. The youngest was 3. She could not take anything with her. She couldn't sell anything because it would raise suspicion. So all she was able to do was pay the person a lot of money, and then take a bunch of cash and jewelry with her, which hopefully she would be able to save. And this is how she went. They had to go through these treacherous mountains. It was a very, very difficult trip. They spent the first part of the trip, the first few days of the trip, they spent 18 hours on camels. It was so difficult to sit on a camel for 18 hours that they literally felt that they were going to collapse. In fact, she had permanent back damage from those camel rides, permanent back injury. Whenever they would complain to the guide would yell at them, pull out a gun, and threaten to kill them if they yell one more time. And this is the trip, and she's with her kids. On the way, they were robbed by bandits who always knew that there were Jews who were traveling through, and everything that she had was stolen from her. During the daytime, it was the desert. It was burning hot. At nighttime, it was freezing. Again, extremely, extremely difficult. When they got to the mountain area, they switched from camels to donkeys. And the precipice of some of the mountains were so narrow that there was just room for the donkey to go by, and literally the slightest step off, and whoever was on the donkey would fall. So it was a terrifying, terrifying journey. They ran through a freezing stream, and they lost their shoes. And afterwards, they had to walk over cactus plants and sharp stones and everything, all in barefoot, which you can imagine what that did. The mother and the oldest son took turns holding the 3-year-old during this time. Then she said there was one point that they came to a bridge that went from the top of one mountain to the top of another, which was a flimsy bridge made out of ropes and some slats of wood. And it was so, and literally, I mean, you look down, it was so terrifying, and it looked like it could barely hold even one of them. She was so terrified that she started screaming, she's not going across this, and she's not letting her kids go across this. The guy took out his gun, said, if you don't go across it, I'm going to kill you right now. And she was so angry that the anger actually fueled her ability to get across. She went across with her kids. 2.5 weeks later, they finally reached the Turkish border. They get to the Turkish border. The guide, this guy who threatened her with a gun and was going to kill her 20 times through this trip, bends down, hugs every one of the kids. And he says that I'm also a Jew. And I want you to know that your kids are, he said in Hebrew, giborim, are heroes. To go through this is just unbelievable for little kids to go through this. And I want you to know that every single time I took out my gun to threaten you, I knew if I wouldn't do that, you would never reach this point. And it was all my love for you, not because I wanted to scare you. What does this story teach us? This woman could have sworn every step of the way that this man is the most evil and cruel man in the world. And the reality is, as she was able to find out, which is a gift, she was able to find out that this man loved her so much that he was willing to force her to get to where she needed to go, otherwise she would never have done it on her own. We need to be able to look at everything that goes on in our life as a gift. It's very difficult. And very often, I shouldn't say most often, but there are definitely things in our lives, and some of them which are drastic, which we will never understand in our lifetime. But if we remember that it's God who is lovingly putting before us whatever needs to be put before us for whatever reason, then we understand that it's from love, and it's not something that God is just dumping on us, but it's for a reason. There's a verse in the book of Proverbs that says this. It's going to be a difficult verse, okay? But I'm sharing it because I believe it to be true. I'll say it is true. And we need to, instead of constantly resisting and letting the wall block us, which does nothing for us, to try and get this wall out of the way. It says, Ki es asher yehav Hashem yochiach. The people who God loves, He reprimands. It may be counterintuitive, but I'll tell you something. I'll put this into the form of parents, okay? Parents know how difficult it is to truly raise our children the way they need to be raised. And surely in our culture today, the greatest challenge we have is that we do not exercise enough discipline for our children. When the Rebbe started an organization for children, a club for children, he called it the Army of God, Tzivos Hashem, the Army of God. And someone asked him, why are you calling it the Army of God? You want our children to be aggressive, combative? Why are you calling it the army of God? And he writes in the letter back, full-page letter, I thought long and hard about this and about how to make sure our children in America who are not beholden to anything are going to learn to have discipline and do things because they're supposed to do them, not because they like to do it. And the best example I was able to find was in the army, where a soldier always has to follow orders. This is vital. This is vital for us. It's actually vital for us. And it's vital for our children. But it's so hard to do. But when we do it, we're giving our children what they really, really need, because those children grow up to be beautiful, capable, thriving adults because they were given structure in their life. Sometimes when things knock us a certain way, and we may not even understand what this did for us, to be honest, when God does it, because some of it is just not understandable. But we need to be able to accept that it's coming from the love of Hashem giving us, for whatever reason it is, that which we need. And I'm going to say again, I feel guilty talking about this. But I'm saying it because I know it to be true, and I don't want to deprive any one of us of this truth, of what the Torah teaches us. What we need to do is, no relationship ever grows unless there's trust. Trust doesn't mean that you earned my trust, so I'm going to trust you. Trust means I will trust you before you earn my trust. That's when trust is. When you haven't earned it yet, and I trust you. We need, just as that's true in every relationship, we need to trust God. We need to trust that, God, I'm going to move forward as best as I can, and I'm going to trust that what you're putting in my life is what is necessary for me and for whatever reason needed. There was a man, I want to conclude with this. There was a man who was raised, I think he was given a Jewish upbringing, I don't know to what extent, but he sort of left it, and he was sort of angry and defiant and whatever. And for whatever reason, he came with his family to have an audience with the Rebbe. And they were told that they all have to write a note to the Rebbe. Usually we'd write your name and your mother's name for a blessing. Everyone had to write a note, something, a request, something. And he said, I have nothing to write. I'm not here. I'm here only as an extension of the family. I'm not even here. I could care less if I see the Rebbe or not. They said, you can't go in unless you write a note. You have to write a note. That's what they told him, okay? So he wrote a note, and this is what he wrote. He wrote, if God is so great, why does he insist on all these tiny details? Which is a great question, actually, right? If God is so great, why does he insist on all these tiny details? You got to do this and that. It's got to be this way, that way, at this time, not at that time. Otherwise, you missed it. Whatever, right? You know what I'm talking about, right? The whole religious stuff, right? That's what he wanted to know. So the Rebbe read his question first, and he turned to him and he said, I don't understand your question. Now, when the Rebbe said, I don't understand your question, it didn't mean he didn't understand the question. He was a very intelligent man. So the man started to explain what his question is. So the Rebbe said, I understand. He said, the Rebbe told him, it's not for God, it's for us. You think all of that minutia, all of those details are for God? You think God needs that? God doesn't need that. God gave it to us for us. God wants us to be close to Him, and this is the path He gives us. The point is, as the Rebbe saw everything, God gives everything we have, including every single mitzvah that we have to us. When we look at a mitzvah like Yom Kippur, fasting on Yom Kippur, or something else like a fast on July 4th weekend, like we just had, right? So we look at that and we look at that as a nuisance, and I can relate to that very well. I don't enjoy fasts, right? But there is some part of me, because of my education, which I hope to impart upon all of us, that knows that this is a gift. It's a gift to be able to stop. It's a gift to be able to fast. It's a gift to be able to realize the loss that we as a people have. It's a tragedy that we can't get in touch with that. It's a gift to be able to even think about it for a minute. Something that happened 2,000 and 2,500 years ago. And be in touch with it and experience it. That's a profound human being. God gave me a gift a gift to be profound. This is true for every single thing that goes on in life. And you can discover in every single thing that you have in your day-to-day living, never mind the religious aspects of life, but even the things that we struggle with, if you ask yourself, what is the gift in this? Guaranteed you will be able to find it. And if you can't, guaranteed a good friend of yours who stands outside of you, who's not as biased to your story, will be able to show you a silver lining, which may just be the gift in that thing. We can choose to see the misery, right? Which is there. We know the misery is there, when it's a tragedy, but we can live in the misery. And there is a part of us that wants to stay there because there's a certain loathing that we enjoy. Or we can choose to see the silver lining, to see that God is loving me and giving me so much that He knows I can't comprehend it, and I'm not going to understand it, and I'm going to complain about it, but He knows I need it, and therefore He's going to put it there for me. That is understanding and feeling the love that God gives us. And that is truly the infinite love that God offers to us every single day. Let me conclude by saying this. I know of great people, and I say great people, I mean people who are truly developed individuals. Okay? I don't mean on a religious level, although they were religious, but that's not what makes them unique. What makes them unique was that they were developed. They let their religiousness actually form their characters. They were people I would aspire, which I don't think I would ever achieve. And they suffered tremendous tragedy. And they suffered from that tragedy. There's no question that they suffered from the tragedy. And you can't escape that. That's we're human, right? We're going to suffer from that tragedy. But the difference between suffering from a tragedy and being able to digest it, to be able to carry it, is the difference between whether we understand this idea or not. If we don't understand this idea, it can destroy us completely. The tragedy, the suffering can destroy us. If we understand this idea, we at least have the soldiers to carry this burden for the rest of our life. And that is a major, major difference. So hopefully next time you open up a prayer book, you'll notice all of the prayers about God loving us, and you'll give more thought to this. And hopefully we took a step 1 inch forward in our loving relationship with God. And I'm here if you have any questions. But thank you everyone for joining.